one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 2 is reading of the mission statement. Antoinette, can you please read that?
Yes, ma'am. Our mission, Macomb County Community Mental Health, guided by values, strengths, and informed choices of the people we serve, provides quality services which promote recovery, community participation, self-sufficiency, and independence.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, adoption of the agenda. I'll take a motion.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Megan, support by Lori. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item number 4, hearing of the public. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address this board? My glasses on so I can see. Going once, going twice. Okay, there will be another hearing of the public at the end of the meeting. Moving on to item 5, item 5A, request to approve RPC engagement letter compliance audit for fiscal year '24, $24,000. This has been approved by legal. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Nick, support by Antoinette. Tony?
Good evening. As noted in the bar, this is a required audit and what is one of the compliance aspects of the work that we do. Rosalind has been our auditor since 2019. They have not increased the engagement fee. So those are the highlights, but if there are any particular questions, I can try to field those this evening.
Okay, thanks, Tony.
Okay.
Any questions for Tony? All right, I have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item
Thank you.
5B, request to approve a 3-year lease for location in Sterling Heights, Michigan for the Substance Use Engagement Center. This has been approved by legal. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Megan, support by Mark. Nicole?
Yes, so we found a location in Sterling Heights. It's on Van Dyke, just south of 17 Mile, that we think will work for our engagement center. We did get approval from the zoning board to use it for the purposes we're looking for. So we're hoping to get approval for the lease.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I saved that email. It's permanently in the record.
Nicole, I'm wondering if you could walk through, or Drew walk through how we have an out directly. Like,
Yes, so we did put verbiage in the lease that if for some reason we couldn't use it for the purpose, we couldn't get occupancy, or there was some issue with our grant or the funding, that we would be able to terminate the lease.
That's not what we want.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? I have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Item 6, receive and file CMH Board 2025 meeting schedule. Is that in the packet? Did we get that? No, I missed it. Thank you, Nick. Motion to receive and file. We do a motion? Support, okay, support by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Item number 7, resolutions. Resolution for Ryan Fantuzzi, CMH board member.
So moved begrudgingly.
I know, I'm really sad too. Motion by Megan, support by Antoinette. We read it? What do you guys want to do? No? Okay. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Other than we're sad Ryan's leaving. Okay. Item 8, other possible agenda items. We have a CMHA presentation by Alan Bolter.
Well, good evening. Boy, you weren't kidding there. Pretty quick agenda here. And the funny thing is, I think the last time I was here, you were talking about the SUD Engagement Center in Mount Clemens. So I don't know how long ago that was, but I guess it's full circle. Well, thanks for having me. For those that don't know, my name is Alan Bolter. I'm the Associate Director for the CMH Association. So I have the fun job of interacting with all of our friends over in the state capitol and the governor's office and the departments. So give you a little rundown. I sent over to Tracy, and you have in your packet kind of our recap of what happened or what didn't happen during lame duck. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of some of the I don't know, some of the interesting stories from lame duck, and then kind of where, and then, what highlight some of the things that passed or didn't pass, and then touch a little bit on some of our big priorities that we're working on behalf of all of our members across the state. And then, I've got a list, longer than you probably know of issues. So if there's things that pop up, can certainly address, some of the other key issues that we're working on as well, and can maybe touch on briefly some of the things that we're looking to Washington, D.C. of what we may be, looking at. So as far as lame duck, so actually the legislature, 103rd legislature in the state of Michigan just started today. So today was their opening day in both the House and the Senate. First time that, the House met, really, I guess, officially, their last kind of active day of taking votes was on December 13th. So lame duck was certainly entertaining, to say the least. I was telling Nick Pryor that, I've been working in Lansing for 20 plus years, and I don't know how many times I've told one of our members, like, geez, I haven't seen that before. That's never happened, just because it was so unusual, the activity or lack of activity during the lame duck period. So in the House, they had roughly 11 to 12 legislative session days scheduled for after the election that took place in November to kind of get things done. So, last year they basically had whatever the governor does not sign into law has to start all over again this year, regardless if it passed the Senate, regardless if it passed the House, has to start all over again in the legislative process. So they had 11 or 12 days scheduled in the House. The first week was the week before Thanksgiving, and the Michigan House has 110 House members. Democrats had a 56-54 majority. Democrats had 100% control of state government, the last 2 years. So 56-54 majority. That week before Thanksgiving, I know one of the Democrat members had a medical procedure. A couple other ones were gone at a conference, so they didn't have a full majority on the Democratic side in the House. So there were literally no votes taken that first week. So 3 days are gone then. And they're typically in session Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They come back. They had a 2-week break with hunting Thanksgiving, came back the first week of December. Still, one of the members with a medical procedure wasn't back then. Another one was gone. Essentially, that first week of December, they literally took no votes again. I mean, I think they maybe had 2 or 3 votes. So second week of December, the week of December 9th, they finally got up to full strength and then started moving a ton of stuff on the House floor through the committees in the House side. In the meantime, the Senate's also meeting during this time. They're pumping out a ton of bills out of committee, out of the Senate, sending them over to the House. There's a constitutional amendment in Michigan where once a bill passes a chamber for the first time, the other chamber can't take it up for 5 days. So if they pass something on a Thursday, the other chamber couldn't take it up until Tuesday. So they can't take it up during that same week. So that week of December 9th, the House is meeting. And I think during that time, you had the Speaker of the House, Joe Tate, along with the House Minority Leader, Matt Hall, Senate Majority Leader of the Governor's Office, kind of negotiating on some things. Republicans in the House, their number one priority was they wanted to change the minimum wage law and how it impacts tipped workers, and also attached to that is some paid sick time leave that was attached to that legislation. They wanted that fixed. Those laws go into effect February 21st, so in a little over a month or so. That was their number one priority. They wanted that put up for a vote. There's bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats. They were also talking about some road funding of road funding for local roads. As it turns out, they kind of kept talking throughout that week. The House Speaker called a very rare and very fitting Friday meeting, and the Friday meeting that week fell on December 13th. So Friday the 13th, as they kind of talked in the morning, basically the Speaker went to the Minority Leader in the House and said, we're not going to put the tip credit, paid sick time leave bills up for a vote. Republicans around noon, 1 o'clock basically said, okay, fine, we're leaving. We're going to take our 54 members, and we're not going to come back until you bring those bills up for a vote. Now, the House, still, you had 56 Democrats there, so they still had a quorum. They still had a functioning body. So they continued to meet throughout the day. They continued to vote on bills without Republicans being there. And then around 10 o'clock that night, Representative Karen Whitsitt, who's from the Detroit area, finally said, I've got a couple of bills that are priorities. You've known these are priorities. If you don't take these up for a vote, I'm leaving. About 10 o'clock that night, her bills weren't taken up for a vote, so she's like, all right, fine. I'm packing my stuff up, getting in my car, and I'm leaving. They tried to keep her in session to kind of keep moving some of their priorities through. She ended up leaving. As soon as she walked out of the Capitol, they no longer had a quorum, so it basically shut down the function in the House. So they had 2 days of session left that third week of December on the 18th and the 19th. The 18th, Republicans did not come back. Representative Whitsitt did not come back. The 19th was the last day. Republicans were not there. Representative Whitsitt said, okay, fine, I will show up. The speaker gave her some assurances that we'll put a couple of your bills up for a vote. She drove up to Lansing, went into the minority leader's office. They had some back and forth in there. And essentially, after a few hours, the Speaker of the House came out probably sometime mid-afternoon and basically said, the House is basically done until December 31st, essentially ending session in the House. They couldn't get folks on the same page, and basically shut down all legislative activity from the House side. So what that essentially meant was you still had the Senate meeting. The Senate had a choice of, they still had a functioning majority and a functioning body. We can either pack up and leave because the House is no longer there, which basically meant over the last, several weeks during all this drama, the Senate has been sending bill after bill after bill over to the House. The House had roughly almost 250 Senate bills that were sent over there that are essentially dead because the House was no longer there. So the Senators like, we put in all this work to do this, and now all those things are basically flushed down the toilet. So they had the choice. We can either stay and work on only House-passed bills, and they can only work on the House bills if they make no changes to them. Because if they made changes to them, they would have to go back to the House for a concurrence vote, which if the House is not there, then you couldn't do that. So they could only vote on bills that were already over in the Senate, and they could not change them at all. So the Senate basically said, okay, fine, we're going to do that. They were in session that day on the 19th for 29 straight hours. They did not adjourn until about 3 o'clock on December 20th. I think they ultimately ended up passing around 90 or so bills. And so, that was just kind of one of those things like, geez, I've never seen that before, but essentially that ended the legislative session last month. So what I sent over, this is a long-winded way to say, what I sent over is kind of what was passed, what was not passed. So some of the highlights, just want to highlight for you, And the bills that are going to the governor are still, the governor still has to sign them into law. If she does not sign them, then there's what's called a pocket veto. Then they do not go into law. So she has to sign these into law. So one of them would repeal work requirements for Medicaid expansion. That's a bill that's going to the governor. There's two bills on naloxone distribution that really gets rid of the gray area around administration and distribution of Narcan, essentially. It removes all the criminal and civil liabilities of that. That's on its way to the governor. There's also, I don't think I included this in your packet, but I have on my list, there was a pretty big school safety package that went to the governor. They did get that done before all the dysfunction in the House. Those bills would do things like create standardized terminology when, schools and law enforcement talk about, type of situations. It would also create some standardized response requirements. It also creates a school safety committee. It replaces the school safety commission with a school safety and mental health commission, and then requires schools to put together a behavioral threat assessment and management team. The other one that it's on its way to the governor, has to deal with it. On your list there is 6058. This has to do with public employee health benefits, where if you recall, the previous law said that you as a public employer cannot pay more than 80% of your employee health care. This now changes it. It makes 80% the floor, and so you could go up to 100% if you wanted to as a public body. Now, again, this is something along with, there were two other bills regarding unemployment changes. One of them would extend unemployment benefits from 20 weeks to 26 weeks. And another, in that same bill, it also expands and adds on to the maximum unemployment benefit that someone's allowed. Right now, it's like $350. The bill that was passed and was signed into law by the governor would expand that to $612, phased in over 3 years. And again, you as a public body, and your funds are limited in what the state sends you, all of that adds to your costs. So one of the things that we've already reached out to the Department of Milliman, when you calculate your Medicaid rates, all of these extra business costs have to be included in there, because I mean, all that will add costs to you as an employer. Some of the things that did not pass: there was a big package of bills on assisted outpatient treatment, expanding AOT, kind of beefing that up. That passed the Senate, died in the House. There was a big package of bills on tobacco and vaping, really targeted towards youth. It would, one, require retailers to be licensed, would eliminate flavored vaping in tobacco products. It would increase penalties. It would allow locals to increase penalties and fines. That package of bills, they actually had a package that passed the Senate, and they had a House package that passed and went to the House, or went to the Senate, but those bills were all tie-barred together because they wanted to basically, I get this bill, you get that bill. They wanted to divide them up between the House and the Senate. Because they were tie-barred together, they end up dying because the House wasn't there to act or concur in any of the changes. There was a bill that would remove supervision for limited licensed psychologists, where right now it's a lifelong supervision requirement. This bill would eliminate that after, I think it's like 2,000 or 4,000 hours. That bill ended up dying. There was CCBHC codification bill that would basically put CCBHC in the state statute. Those bills died. So, I mean, there's a whole number of things that, there's a guardianship package out there that ended up not passing. We had a couple of bills on Open Meetings Act changes that would allow for remote participation, remote voting. There was a Senate bill, there was a House bill. Those both ended up dying. So all of these things that did not make its way to the governor and do not have the governor's signature, again, all have to start all over again this year, regardless of the level of activity. So that's just kind of a very quick rundown of what happened and what did not happen during lame duck. So brings us to what's kind of on the horizon now and moving forward. As I said, there's a new change in the Michigan legislature where Republicans now have the majority in the Michigan House, 58-52. Today was the first day. We did get some, there has not been, so all the committee assignments and all that stuff will all get, new committee members on different committees. None of that has been announced yet, probably later this month. But there was an announcement that the House is going to have 18 committees, where last term they had 21, so they're combining some things. And the big announcement is that Representative Hall, there's always been an oversight committee. They are now creating 6 oversight subcommittees, where they just passed in the House rules today that'll give these oversight subcommittees subpoena power to actually compel people to come in and testify. And the 6 oversight subcommittees, you'll enjoy some of the names here. They are weaponization of state government, child welfare system, and I think the child welfare system kind of is all encompassing with MDHHS issues, at least my understanding. Corporate subsidies and state investments, public health and food security, homeland security and foreign influence, state and local public assistance programs. So I think, with the House, they are really going to take a very close look at some of the administration, what they've been doing, if there are questions, concerns. So I think that's going to be a real focus on the House side. And I think from our perspective, that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's having divided government is, probably does not lend itself to be a real fruitful legislative environment, but having a dissenting voice in the House and someone to push back on the administration, to push back on the department, I think in our opinion is a good thing, because the last 2 years, we really didn't get that pushback. I mean, it was basically whatever the department wanted, whatever, the governor's office wanted, the legislature just kind of rolled with that. So having a body that's willing to push back and say, hold on, we're going to ask some critical questions, I think from our perspective, that's really a big thing. Probably the biggest thing that we're going to be working on this year, and especially early on, is, as you're well aware, some of the budget concerns. We know darn well that there was a Medicaid shortfall for FY24. It probably ended around $45 million shortfall for 24. Even when they had money left in the line item in the appropriations line, the 25 rates don't look a whole lot better for FY25. But our bigger concern is, and one of the things we're hoping to use this oversight committee on is, during the Medicaid redetermination process, we know we've done enough analysis on this that we are missing probably hundreds of thousands of missing Medicaid payments that have occurred over the last 4 fiscal years. So during Medicaid redetermination, again, the state was re-enrolling people back into Medicaid, but our contention is we have a ton of people that got put in the wrong Medicaid bucket. So, and specifically the data that we're looking at are individuals that were formerly disabled, aged, and blind, so DAB, which you get roughly $400 per month. It's probably a little bit less than that, but round numbers. If someone's on Healthy Michigan, you get $40. If they're TANF, you get less than that. If they are planned first, you get $0. And if they show up, if they were previously a disabled, aged, and blind, they show up as planned first, you get no dollars, and then you have to use your general fund dollars to serve them. We did an analysis through our Northern Michigan PIHP. They found over the last 4 fiscal years, 51,000 missing payment months where someone was previously a DAB, now they are someplace else in the Medicaid bucket. 51,000 missing months of DAB payments resulted in a $35 million alone to that region. When we do the math across all of our PIHPs, it's almost $700 million over 4 fiscal years, which would go a heck of a long way at fixing a lot of the problems that we have had. So, and again, this is not a new phenomenon. We saw this when Healthy Michigan started in 2014, 2015. People got re-enrolled and they went into Healthy Michigan versus disabled, aged, and blind just because the benefit was the same. It was just easier to re-enroll them. That was a $100 million error back then. We got $60 million back. So this is going to be something that, we've already reached out to the department, giving them the first chance to fix it, have not heard. We've reached out to the governor's office, to the state budget office, to the House and Senate fiscal agencies. We're now going to be working with the legislature, probably very closely with the House Republicans on this, and see whatever we can do to bring this issue to light and get this fixed. I mean, we have the data that shows someone was here and now they're in a different bucket. We should never have an individual that qualifies for disabled, aged, and blind go someplace else. I mean, that's not an appropriate movement, for them. So this is something that we are going to spend a ton of time on trying to figure this out. How do we correct this? Now, I think the continuing moving people in the wrong bucket and moving them specifically to plan first, that issue's been fixed. I mean, they're no longer auto-enrolling people into Plan First, but the financial damage has already been done. So now it's, how do we fix that? So that's a huge issue. I mean, that's something that we're going to spend tons and tons of time on. Like I said, I mean, I've got a list longer than my arm of other issues that we are involved in with the department, but that's a big one. The last thing, and then I'll take questions, would be some of the things that we are looking at on the horizon, maybe coming from Washington, D.C. with a new Trump administration. If you want some fun nighttime reading, look up the Paragon Health Institute. It is a conservative kind of Washington think tank around healthcare issues. There are a number of people that worked in the first Trump administration that went to this think tank and that are now going to go back over to CMS. So some of the things that we're going to be watching for, and if you go to our summer conference in Traverse City, I think we're going to have a couple of our national folks come in and kind of talk about what we're seeing from Washington, D.C. But some of the talk out of Washington, D.C. would be reducing the Medicaid expansion match, where, I just mentioned that Michigan earlier this year passed a bill that prior to that, there's Michigan, along with a number of states, have what's called trigger legislation, where if the federal match on Medicaid expansion drops below the current rate, then the program goes away. We fixed that here in Michigan, but there's a number of states that have that on the books, where if it drops below 90%, they lose their Medicaid expansion. So that's something that the federal government may be looking at. Block granting Medicaid, and again, this isn't unique to Trump. I mean, this is a Washington, D.C. grind with Medicaid in general. They think that the states are scamming them on Medicaid and they spend too much money, and if the states want to do more, they can put in their own money to do that. Eliminating some of the provider taxes that you as a PIHP, you pay some of those provider taxes and you get that money back. The federal government's going to be looking at those kind of things. Work requirements for Medicaid expansion. We just passed a bill to prevent that. And then one of the other things they may look at are any of the outstanding waivers or, some of the waiver projects out there. One of them that comes to mind is one that we really have been working to get in place is the prison jail reentry waiver that allows 90 days prior to being released that we can use Medicaid dollars. That's something that they could very well look at and say, no, we're going to put the stops on that before that gets into place. So just some thought there of what we may be seeing, but we'll kind of, flesh some of that stuff out, as they get rolling out in Washington, D.C. So sorry, that's a lot of stuff. Happy to take questions if you have questions.
Thanks, Alan. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Go ahead, Donna.
You said that, like there would be a possibility that there would be a federal work requirement for Medicaid, but we just passed a bill that wouldn't require that. Would a federal requirement override a state requirement?
I think that there's always been some question that they've always had some of that at the federal level, and then I think if the state passed that, I think that does offer us some level of protection. I think that, ultimately, if push comes to shove, maybe they'll have to do something through the court system to see which overrides what. Now, it would be specific to Medicaid expansion individuals, not just Medicaid in general, but that's a good question. I think with the state passing that law, it does give us some level of protection there.
Nick, I figured you had some comment.
I'll keep my comments to my. We're Facebook friends, so you saw my comment on Facebook, which was an open letter to the legislature, just said, grow up. The reality is that, but I do have a question, because we've been making a lot of progress on the prison and jail, eliminating the prison and jail exemption for Medicaid. And that's one's near and dear to my heart, because I've done a lot of work over the years on prison diversion and jail diversion. what's the we've got a waiver request in.
Yep.
Our waivers obviously don't go into effect without SAMHSA approval. What's the status of that?
I want to say that we had a comment period back in October, November, and then whatever they do with that comment period, then I think they send it in. Now, part of our concern, we work very closely with MAC and with the Sheriff's Association to include local county jails. Well, the state's proposal, this is going to be a 5-year demonstration. It would begin, if their waiver is approved, in 2027. But the state wants to they want to do this in phases. The first phase would be the state prisons and the juvenile detention centers. And then they said in either year 2 or year 3, phase 2 would then be the local county jails, which, now us and, MAC and the sheriff's office, they're screaming up, well, hold on here. We helped push this. We want to be, in year 1. Why are we waiting to year, 2 or year 3? And my, fear would be they never go to phase 2. They just keep it phase 1 because that's where the state savings are. But yeah, I think, as far as, and I don't think, I think they're in the process of sending it out to the folks at SAMHSA and then waiting for their approval. I want to say there's like 30 different states that are in some way, shape, or form have this very similar waiver. I think California was the first, and I don't think their program is not up and running yet, and it may either go up and running this year or next year. So they're all kind of in the same process.
Okay.
May I just add a comment to that too, Nick? We are partnering with the Juvenile Detention Center because, to your point, those would be actually technically January 1st, but we followed up with the department with a couple different people and haven't heard back, kind of asking. We're assuming we've heard on several other things that they're waiting on CMS approval. One of the theories is with the changes coming, like CMS is probably not going to be answering as quickly as they'd originally hoped. So to best of my understanding, as of yesterday, they were still waiting on that CMS approval, and we asked for an update as soon as possible because we again have our Juvenile Justice Center, our Juvenile Detention Center. We partner with them, and they want to do it today, right? They want to start, and we could do it today with a lot of groundwork and partnership with them, and it's a huge savings for them, and ultimately the county in that case.
Yeah, I think the state's timeline they put out in PowerPoint was 2027 was their kind of projected start date of this.
If I can just follow up, in addition to the savings, the tremendous benefit, particularly at the jail level, to people using those services, because you don't change from one formulary to another, you don't change from one provider necessarily to another. You can have a smooth transition from services, some before they went in, some when they're in jail. Hopefully when they come out of jail, you've got a smooth transition. And that, altering the treatment models every few weeks is not in the best interest of the people who are served.
And it would cover almost that, everyone in the local county jail, they're typically not there for more than 90 days. So, as long as they qualify, they would be in.
Yeah, and in Macomb, remember, there's a separate provider in the jail. So I think Nick has made this comment earlier. We do have a partnership with them. We do have staff in the location, but we are trying to advocate now with them for us to be either that solution or part of the solution or something to that. Because to your point, if it's not us, then you potentially would have a different provider, right? And then you're still getting funding, that's great, and you're still getting care, but as you know, people just like you like to stay with your own doctor. You don't want to have a different doctor for 6 weeks and then go back to a different one. So I agree with Nick, we need to be as proactive as possible to be part of that solution. Yes.
Anything else, Nick?
No, I'll keep my comments to myself.
Nick. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Alan.
Well, thank you.
Good job, Ellen. Thanks. Good information.
Great, item number 9, provider comments. Any providers here tonight wishing to comment? All right, item number 10, hearing of the public. Any members of the public wishing to address this board? Going once, going twice. Okay, item number 11, closed session to discuss attorney-client privilege memo dated January 8th of 2025 pursuant to MCL 15.2681H. I will take a motion to go into closed session.
Support.
Motion by Megan, support by Antoinette, and we're going to take a roll call vote. Mark? Donna?
Yes.
Lori? Yes. Megan?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Me? Yes. Antoinette?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes.
Okay.
Good job.
Okay, so we are back in open session. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I do.
Go ahead, Megan.
I would like to move the CCDHC contract to full board along with the PIHP amendment.
A second?
Yeah, but I assume your motion is to add these two items to the agenda and then to approve
That's
them.
fancy. The way Nick said it. I like that. Yes. Nick said it better.
Yeah, we're going to add these two
Full board.
to tonight's agenda and then approve them or refer them with approval to the full board.
Okay, so Megan's motion, amended by Nick, and who seconded? I did. Lori. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thanks, everybody.
I know.
Last item is I just have to remind everybody, we have our full board meeting Wednesday, January 22nd at 6 p.m. here. And then moving on to item 12, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion by Nick, support by Lori. All in favor?
Aye.